and our container should be working right now. It opens and it closes. Nice. Hey there, I'm your host Lesoe, and this is part 13 of our inventory series. In today's video, we'll be creating the containers. So with that said, let's begin. Let's start by going to our content drawer, inventory system, and UI. Now in here, what we want to do is we want to create a ContainerUI widget. So for that, we can duplicate our inventory UI. So right click duplicate, and let's call it WP_ContainerUI. And there's a small change we need to do in here because obviously our container is not going to contain a hotbar. So for that, we want to remove this horizontal box, which is called box_hotbar. So delete that. And then everything else should fill automatically, and it does. Now in the event graph, if we try to compile and save, we'll get an error because we don't have the hotbar UI anymore. So let's get rid of those two things. And then everything else should work. So let's try this again, compile and save, and it does. Next, we want to go ahead and create a widget, which is both going to show our inventory and the container inventory. At the moment, we are sitting with a player display widget. So we can right click on that and do a duplicate and call it WP_ContainerDisplay. Now the player display already kind of shows us the character and the inventory, but we also need the container inventory inside. So if we click on our horizontal box, inside we have two. We have a box left, which is for our character, and a box right, which is for our inventory. Let's just rename them quickly because we'll have three. So box character there, we'll have a box inventory, and the last one we can just Control-C and Control-V on the horizontal box. Should paste it for you, and we'll just call it container inventory. And we want to delete the inventory UI from it and get our famous container UI inside, and we want to fill. Almost there, it's looking squished, so click on the border frame. On the size X, we'll do 1900 by size Y, sitting on 8000. That's good. Now, if we go down to render transform, and go to scale, now for the scale, do 0.9. It's just going to fit a little bit on our screen because we have so much to show. We don't want to kind of overwhelm the player with everything that's going on. So that's fine. Now also I can add a spacer between the inventory and the container inventory just to add a little bit more design to this, more flair. Spacer, there we go. I'll just click on it and drag it between, let's close those boxes and just drag it between the two boxes there. And if you click on it, we can give it a size. So we'll go 60:1. We get something like that, which is fairly nice. So let's compile and save that. Next, let's head over to our event graph, and inside I want to create a new variable, and we'll call this our container inventory. And the type is going to be ppc_inventory. And we want to make this instance editable and exposed on spawn, because we need to give this value outside of this widget. Then we'll go ahead and create a function called display container. In here, we'll grab our container UI, which comes, by the way, from putting in this widget in here itself. And we'll do a refresh inventory. And the reason we can do that is because everything inherits the blueprints from our other copied widget. The inventory here, we can drag in here and we just have a input. We can leave it at that, compile and save. And let's go into the event graph. On pre-construct, I want to display the inventory, the hotbar, and I want to grab the container inventory then and do display container. Look the container inventory to inventory and compile and save. Next, we want to go ahead and open up the inventory actor. So for that, we'll go into our content drawer, inventory system, inventory actor, and there we go, BP_inventory actor. So let's open that up. Now inside here, we have a create player display. Now we want to create a container display. So we'll click the plus, create a new function, create container display. So in here, I want a reference to the inventory first. So in here, click on that, create an input, and we'll call this container inventory. Of course, the type is going to be our inventory component. So BPC underscore inventory. Here we go. And drag out from the execution pin and do create widget. Now the widget in question is our container display. The container inventory will come from here like so. We'll promote this to a variable called WB underscore container display. And we'll then add to viewport. So let's compile and save that. Next, we'll go ahead and create another function called open container. So just like we're opening our inventory, we want an input in here, which is going to be our container inventory. And we already have this component, BPC underscore inventory. And from here, we want to grab our scene capture component because we want to show our player character. So we'll do show only actor components. And the actor to show is our wardrobe character. Drag that in to in actor. And next we'll grab our create container display. The inventory will come from this guy here. So instead of dragging the pin, we can do get container inventory. And this refers to this variable we have as an input there. So that's that. Afterwards, we want to disable the input for our player and enable the input for this actor, this player controller. So we'll do get hero and do get hero comes from our blueprint function library. We'll do disable input. The player controller will come from here. Get player controller. Go in there. And we then want to enable input. The player controller will come from here. And at the very end, I want to grab my container display, do a return node, and I just want to return this. So that's that. Let's compile and save. And let's go ahead, create another function called close container. So when we close our container, we want to grab this container display, do a get, and check if it's valid. If it is valid, we will remove it from the screen, remove from parent. We'll set our wardrobe actor to be nothing because we don't want to render this in the background constantly when we're not using it. We'll steal our code from open container, get hero. We can just, never mind, actually, we'll just do get hero and do a enable first. For the player, we also want to disable input for get player controller. So we're disabling it for, again, this actor. We're just doing the vice versa, and then we just want to enable it for the player. And anything else I'm missing? I want to then destroy this entire actor afterwards. We don't need it. And if it's not valid, well, it's not valid. So we'll compile and save. Next, let's open up our inventory system folder, right click, and we'll create a new folder called containers. Now inside here, we'll have a list of all of the containers that we'll make. But the first thing we need to do is to create that parent class. So let's right click, click blueprint class, actor, and we'll call it BP underscore container underscore base. Let's save it and open it. Inside, we want to add a static mesh, and these models will represent, or these components will represent our models. So we'll call it container base. And I have a lid that's going to swing, close, and open. So we'll click on this. We'll add another static mesh, and we'll call it container lid. Now, of course, if you have multiple things opening in your container, you can add multiple static meshes to it, and we'll just have to create a different setup for the timeline. So multiple things will be opening. But on the container base, we'll click on that and we'll search for collision. Now inside here, you want to click on collision presets and set this to be custom because we want to block our interactive channel. Otherwise, we're not hitting any channel, so we're not interacting with anything. So that's important. We'll close that then. And while having the static mesh selected, we can set a mesh in here. So chest base, and we'll then add another one for our chest top, like so. And just move it to get it in the place that you want it to. Something like that. And yeah, I'm happy with this. So let's change this back to 10. We'll compile and save that, head into our event graph. And in here, we need to do a few things. We'll click on our class settings and search for a BPI, which is our blueprint interface interaction. Click on that. We need this. And we also need access to our inventory itself. So our inventory component, inventory, otherwise our chest won't have any storage. So that's that. Let's compile and save. And we can add a few variables in here. For example, we'll get our container out here and we don't have any parameters that we can change. Now we can change that if we add a few variables. So we'll add a variable called container slots. And in here, we can manually add what we want the chest to spawn in with, for example, item slot is the type you want, the structure we have made, and you want this to be an array. Otherwise, we'll just have one item in the chest. And if you want this to be editable outside in here, well, then all we got to do is change this to be instance editable. Next, we'll add a container size, which will make integer and single, again, instance editable. And we'll do a container name, which will do a text, again, instance editable. Compile and save this. And now if we go outside, all of these parameters are available to be changed. So container name will do old chest. Container size will do, let's say, 21. And we could also even add items to spawn this in with, but we don't have to. So let's go back into the editor. Inside here, we want to click on our event begin play. And from here, we'll grab our inventory component and do set item slots. And these slots will be set to whatever our container slots are. So our content in here, like so. Next, we want to resize this whole thing. So we'll do get item slots and we'll do resize. And the size will come from our container size, like so. Okay. Next, let's go to the left-hand side and click on the drop-down on interfaces, double-click on interact with, and in here, we want to get our player controller. We want to cast to our controller. In my case, it's the hero controller. That's what I've named it. And from here, we have access to create inventory actor. So that's our inventory there. This will spawn it. We can do open container. And the container to open is this guy, this component in here. And next we can just do for good measure print string. For testing purposes, you don't have to, of course. I'll do container open. And let's compile that and save. Next, let's also click on the look at. And in here, I want to grab the container name. And from the message, I'll do a format text. And on the format, we'll do search space, curly brackets, the container, or we could just put X in here and close the curly brackets, hit enter, put this into X. And there we go. Let's compile and save that. Next, let's open up our interaction system and open up our interaction component. And in here on the event graph, we want to update our interaction. Right now, we're only interacting with our items, but if they don't have a component, that's the item, we do nothing. So on not valid, we'll interact with our container. So for this, we can do target actor. We'll do interact with message. The interactor will be our owner, like so. The not valid will go in here, and that's it. Let's compile and save. Next, let's open up our player folder and go into our controller. Inside here, we want to open up our inventory input. So let's break this down, disconnect everything for the moment. And from the inventory that we're checking, if it's valid, we want to check also our container. So let's get our container display and do a convert to a validated get. So on not valid, we want to close our inventory. So this guy here, not valid. And the target will have to be our inventory actor. So let's grab that, plug it in. And let's bring this closer. Then if it is valid, we want to close our container. So for that, we need to get our inventory actor again and do close container, because it's already on the screen. And then we'll just print string in here, container closed, close. And if, what next? Then if this is not valid, we want to create an inventory actor and open up our inventory like so. And I believe that's it. So let's compile and save this. In this next part, we want to go ahead and animate our container. So with that said, we need to open up our interaction system and update our interaction interface. So let's open this up, create a new function. Let's call it our interact action. And all this is going to do is it will send a message to let our container know, hey, open up or close. So we'll compile and save that. Next, let's go into our inventory system, containers, and in here, create a blueprint structure, calling it s_container sound effects. Let's open this up, change this to be our sound base. Object reference, and we'll have two. In here, we'll have our open sound and our close sound. And let's compile or save that and exit. Next, let's head into our container parent class, and in here, create another variable called isOpen. And this will be a Boolean, and we'll have another variable called container sound effects. And this will be of type s_container sound effect. And if we compile, we can give it a default value. So we'll do that, and we'll do open. What if we do chest? We have opening a chest, and we have closing a chest. Play this. I can, okay. Also, we can make this variable instance editable, and then let's compile and save. And we'll be able to change the sounds as well. If we click on that, container sound effects, we can change those if we desire. Next, we'll go ahead and open up our inventory system again, UI, and we want to open up the container display. Now in the event graph, we want to create a event dispatcher, and this will let us know once the widget has been created or not. So then we know if we should open the container or not, play the animation, I mean. So in here, we'll do on container closed, is what we'll call it. And that's all we need. Let's compile and save this. Next, let's go ahead and open up our container. And on the event interact with event, we want to update that. So after opening our container, we'll drag from the blueprint and do bind event on container closed. And this is just referencing that event dispatcher we made. Now with that, we want to call an event when this is happening. So we'll do create event, and we'll do create a matching event. And let's call it update animation. That's good for now. Next, let's go to the left-hand side and click on the drop-down on interfaces. And now we have a new option called interact action. Let's click on that. And in here, then we want to grab our isOpen variable and do a not Boolean. And I'm doing not Boolean just to come out of true. We'll grab a branch. And if it's not open, we will set this to be open. And if it's, we'll do vice versa. If it's opened, we'll change it to be closed. And then we want to get our actor location to play sound at location for both of these. We paste that. Location will be this container's location, and the sound, again, we can grab that, break this open, and even put it in there, like so. Okay, and then for the timeline, we'll do add timeline, call it container timeline. Open this up. The length, I want the chest to open, let's say, in a second. So we'll do that. We'll click on new track, add float track, right click, add key to curve float, set this to 0, hit enter to save it, 0 to 0 and enter to save it again. Right click again, add key to curve float, time do 1 second, hit enter, and on the value, we'll set this to 1 and hit enter. Okay, I hope that's all good then. We'll compile and save that, exit out of that, and plug this to play. Then on reverse, we'll do that. New track, that's the name of this guy here. New track, let's name it something, rename container track. And we'll do a lerp and plug this into your alpha channel. A is going to be the closed value and B is the open value. Now, if we go to the viewport, click on the lid and hit on the rotation, we can rotate this. So I want mine to go about -120. So let's do that. -120. And then this will grab our container lid and do set relative rotation. Right click, split this value, plug this into X, update that. And the reason I know this goes into X is because if we click on this again and rotate this, we can see the first channel being changed. So that's X on rotation. And there we go. We can then, next, let's go ahead and plug our update animation event as well to run this check again if we need to. And let's compile and save. Next, we'll go back into our interaction folder, interaction component. And on here, we also want to call that message, which is our interact action. So grab your target actor and do interact action message, like so. And let's compile and save. So just before we go and test this, I forgot to do one more thing. Let's open up our inventory system UI and go into our container display. And in here, we've created our container closed event dispatcher, but I'm never calling it anywhere. So on event destruct, we want to click on this and call it. Otherwise, we're never actually using it. So let's compile and save that. And now if we play the game, we can open up our container, press tab to close it, open it again, and tab to close. Now, if you press E, nothing is happening. But if you want to use E as well to close it, what we can do is we can open up our player, our controller, and in here, call our input action interact. And from here, we can grab this code like so, Control C, Control V, and on started, we'll call all of this. And let's try, compile, save, play again, press E to open and E to close. So this is it for the video. In the next episode, we'll be creating the item inspect. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, leave a like. And as always, happy developing.